Hi there, this is Billy Tarazio with another episode of the Modern Divorce Podcast. And today I am so excited to be joined by a representative of Estate Management Services, Mr. Fred. Oh, help me with your last name, sir.
Certainly.
Lib. Love it.
Yes.
Um, and today we're going to talk about how you can manage to value accurately and keep track of and divide valuable personal property. Now, many of you know in divorce and in family court, judges don't like to touch personal property, but Fred sure knows how valuable that can be, how important that can be. And he and his company have a solution for valuing and making recommendations about that property, cataloging that property. Fred, welcome to the show and tell me a little
Thank
bit
you.
more about what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Billy. It's a pleasure to be with you and talk to you this morning. I am a longtime retired trust officer. I've been in the Valley for almost 40 years. I retired about 4 years ago from one of the smaller bank trust departments here in town. But over the course of my career, I've worked for large, small, medium-sized. And so my background is really business development for personal trust and personal trust administration. So right off the top, I have an awful lot of friends and associates that work for probably every company here in town that represents corporate fiduciaries. However, I retired about not quite 4 years ago and was happy in my retirement until a friend of mine by the name of Evan, E-B-E-N, Bull, who owns Estate Management Services, contacted me and said, Fred, it'd be nice if you would think about joining us now that you're retired. And I said, well, don't you understand what retirement means? And he said, well, I do. He said, but I don't think you're going to be busy enough to keep yourself, happy and occupied. So he worked on me for about 6 or 8 months. And I reluctantly agreed to do business development for the company. And I'd known the company, I'd used the company in the past when I was a trust officer. Because what the company basically does, Billy, is they deal with exclusively the administration of personal property and real property. And that's very, very important and helpful and necessary in the world of trust and fiduciary, because estate settlement involves the passage of property either by probate through the court and or trust by private document to beneficiaries, or in some cases, the heirs at law. And, trust companies and others are great at distributing cash and securities, but not so much personal property. So that's what we do. We administer personal property and real property by getting in and identifying it, determining if it has value, inventorying it, and working on behalf of whoever's entrusted to do the post-death settlement.
Okay. But we're talking about divorce. So when
Yes.
people are getting divorced, uh, one of the things that they struggle with is dividing personal property. Things like gun collections or art,
Mhm.
things that might be very valuable that the family court is just ill-equipped to handle. And so in those
Sure.
circumstances, what do you do?
Yeah. In those circumstances, again, we provide the services that I touched on earlier because we're an independent third party agent. So if you have a client, opposing counsel has a client, we don't really represent either one of you exclusively. We represent the matter at hand before the court. And in that case, as an agent for basically both of you on behalf of your clients, we're going in with permission and agreement by all parties to identify everything that's in question during this divorce proceeding. Primarily, the first thing we do is an inventory with photos, so that basically by room, the items, the major items for sure, but in many cases, other small items are identified, are inventoried, and memorialized in our document. Having said that, though, that's not the end of the job. That's just determining, what we have, and now what's the value. And in a lot of cases, to the untrained eye and the uninformed, other than the emotion involved in the history, there may not be a lot of value. But that's many, many times not the case. You've heard of situations where somebody bought a painting at a flea market and they sold it for a couple $1 million. Well, those are extreme situations, but they do exist in the real world as well. And
Hmm.
in some cases, not only estates, as I mentioned, but in divorce matters, they have those types of things, or
Hmm.
they have them, and more importantly, they don't realize the value. And
Mm.
obviously, it's key in trying to work through a divorce settlement to get agreement. And one of the best ways to get agreement is to have impartiality and
Hmm.
experts determining value
Hmm.
so that you know where the starting point is, you know how level the playing field is, and you can go from there in terms of really equitably and as fairly and clearly as possible, settling the matter basically on behalf of your client, but also opposing counsel on behalf of their client at the same time.
I think that that is so key. What you just said is so crucial. Like, in order to get a settlement or a good, fair ruling, you need information. And most of us just don't have enough information about personal property, what's there,
Mhm.
how much it's worth. Um, and so, are you all the company that determines the value, or are you working with appraisers?
No. No, we, in our 10 years of existence, Billy, what we've done is we have worked with and vetted outside professionals. Just like professionals seek us out, we seek out other professionals that are specialists in their area. And there are many, many personal property appraisers, what we call tangible personal property. But then there's subsets of that where there's all sorts of collectibles that have value that require a specialized appraiser. Over the course of my time with the company, I've seen just a little bit of it where we've had collectible cars, where we've had antique furniture. We've had all sorts of things that the average regular garden variety appraiser could probably affix a value to, but is it accurate?
Mm-hmm.
What's the basis for their knowledge in determining the value? So, in the course of providing our service, we become a resource for our clients in that if there's services that are needed in the way of appraisals, we know who to contact. They again work independently. They don't work for us. We bring them in as kind of a sub agent and we use them exclusively for the services that we identify that they need to be tasked with. But they're done then after that. And we're never, ever using that same party to sell the property on behalf of the client if that's the route they need to go. Because I'm assuming that in many cases, you see where the clients aren't going to split everything down the middle and you get this and you get that. Ultimately, sometimes the best remedy is to determine value and then to sell it for best, highest, fair market price and split the proceeds. So if that's the case, if that's the avenue to get this resolved, then in many cases, we'll use other parties that we vetted for selling that personal property, but never ever the appraisers that we're using for determining value.
Fantastic. Do you also create reports of what's there and how much it?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Fantastic.
Absolutely. You touch on a great question, and that is one of our mainstays of all of our services, our suite of services, is doing an inventory that is with photos and that is kind of cataloged and documented by items and by room. So not only are we just providing photos, but we're putting them in context of what the item is, where it's located, and then determining or based on what the items are, if values need to be determined, those can be used to identify those items for determining value. Now, from there, there's no substitute for the appraiser to see the items. They're not going to do it from photos. But the point is, the photos are our starting point for providing to you and providing to, let's say, opposing counsel on behalf of your clients. Where's our starting point? What do we have there? And maybe we can, get past some disputes by saying, here's the snapshot, literally, of everything. Now let's go from there. What's going to be the disposition? And that helps work towards a settlement, hopefully, because now we're not just guessing at what's there. And further, we may not need to be in a situation where we don't want to guess relative to value. But starting point is a photographic memorialized inventory by room of all items.
Well, that's also fantastic for people who are worried about someone getting rid of their stuff, which unfortunately does happen in divorce. So if you get that
Yes.
catalog, and then something's missing, then you kind of know, at least you know what was missing, and you can make a better or more proper waste claim. So this is just
Yeah, that's right. We basically can help the client work backwards then, and they say, well, if something's missing, look, I have a photograph of something that is, shows it here. Where is it? And by the way, I want to mention that we're not going in alone. We have teams, and generally we're sending a team of 2 people, not only to protect our clients who've enlisted our services, but to protect ourselves so that, we are certainly demonstrating and carrying out the independent, impartial nature of our services.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Fred. This has been a fantastic episode of the podcast. I appreciate it. And we will link to your company's website and let everybody know where they can find you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Billy. It's a pleasure. Thank you.